Welcome to the Lightforge. This is your host, Adwikta.
Hey guys, this is Merps, and today we got a very special guest with us.
Hey guys, it's Hafu here.
What's up?
Welcome, Hafu.
Yeah, we
Thank
have our
you.
first guest. This is a very special day for the Lightforge. I feel like we're getting more legit now that we're having actual guests on our podcast. So, for those of our listeners who maybe don't know much about like streaming or the competitive scene or anything about that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, Hafu, and how you're involved in Hearthstone Arena?
Okay, I started playing Hearthstone back in closed beta. I pretty much just saw on Twitch there was a lot of interest in watching Hearthstone. Now, I didn't know what it was, but I am familiar with Blizzard games. So I went out and got myself a key, lost miserably to the tutorial, and then with the help of many of my friends, including Sky and Chaox and Trump, I learned a bit about card game basics and created my own style of arena, if you will. Now I do pretty well and mostly stream arenas.
Wait. So you were not good at Arena at one point? There was like a time where you were not actually good at Arena. This is hard to imagine.
My first two arenas, I went 1-3 and 1-3. So I was like, wow, I don't know what I'm doing at all. I didn't understand the cards. I didn't even know the cards. I couldn't understand how to evaluate the cards. I didn't understand how to craft a deck, what you're looking for after you play a card. Do you trade? Why do you trade? All these questions, you know?
What is
Like
trading even?
Yeah, I didn't understand how to think about it.
Interesting. I did not know that. So, when and I guess this is burning a lead a little bit because we didn't really mention this now, and if people don't know, then they really don't know. But this is fresh off of your Lord of the Arena 4 victory, and you are now the Lord of the Arena or Lady of the Arena. Well, how should we call
Lord
it?
of the Arena.
Lord of the
The
Arena.
tournament name is Lord of the Arena. I think it's silly to say lady.
Okay.
I prefer Lord.
Great. So it's Lord of the Arena, Hafu. This is Lord of the Arena 4, and at this point, I think Hafu has also. This is how you can tell this is our first guest. We didn't even like figure out how to introduce her. Hafu, last November in BlizzCon, Blizzard, you were at BlizzCon with Trump, and Blizzard kind of stepped out and then announced the records of kind of just you and Trump. I forgot what Trump's record was, but you were the top 20 at the time, and they haven't announced anyone since. So all anybody knows as far as how good people's records are in the arena was from last year in November, and it was you were the best streamer's account at the time. And it was in the top 20. So this is arena royalty that we're chatting to right now. And this arena royalty apparently was not good at the arena, which I find very like kind of unbelievable. By the time I
I
started
wasn't
watching,
good at arena? Oh, at the very beginning. I see.
no, I mean you're not good at the arena right now, clearly.
Oh, you're right. Damn it. Need more notes.
This was actually the entire point of getting you on here, so Adwicta could just tell you that.
Now it's over. We're done. Lightforge is
Right.
over. You can sign off of this Hangouts now. But so, how did you become good at the arena? Because you're obviously very, very, very good at the arena right now, and one of the best players and
Thank
the
you.
best tournament player at the moment, having just taken home the prize. At Lord of the Arena, for the people who don't know, that's a tournament hosted by, I think this time was a connection, but it was Tempo Storm and Twitch, and this was at PAX. And it is the only arena tournament, but also really well done and the biggest arena tournament. They've had a lot of experience doing it. And if you had watched it on Twitch or if you haven't, you should check it out. It's kind of the model right now, I think, for where more arena tournaments are going to be going. But we'll talk about that afterwards. First, you're good right now. You were bad before. Let's get back to the question. How did you get from really, really bad and losing the tutorial to, like, let's say, sort of okay and, like, knocking on the door of being an infinite player?
Well, I really like learning, and I get really excited when I'm bad at something because that means I can get better. Every time I start a video game, I'm so much worse than anyone else who ever plays video games because I started playing games at 14, and I only played World of Warcraft from 14 till 18. And so, you know, my palette of video games very low. But that just means I have so much more to learn, and it's all about like figuring out where it's going wrong, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you start a new game, you just gotta figure out like all the knowledge that you can. You figure out all the components, and once you have the components, then you can kind of figure out, okay, I need to work on trading, or I need to work on drafting. I don't understand this concept. Why did that work? That he could just rush, like, why did that face hunter just rush me down? Why was that okay? Like, all these new concepts.
Yeah, I mean, I think we would argue back then that it was not okay, and that
It
something
was actually. I got rushed down a few times by hunters, and I
in
remember
the
arguing
arena.
with Trump. Yeah, but by hunters, and
In
I argued with
classic?
Trump. Yes, classic.
Wow.
Um,
I had always
yeah,
thought back in classic that Hunter was near unplayable because of how bad that class was.
Old Unleashed used to charge the beast that you played, right? So there was like
Oh, you're talking
some.
about way beta. Okay, this is before we were
Yeah,
even like playing the game. We
this
started
is
playing
like.
open
No, no, I
beta.
played during that time. You had not yet.
Okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
and you could actually get rushed down. Um, And I didn't understand that because, the first person to really teach me about what to do in Hearthstone was Trump. And
Mm,
he has like that value play, like you
yeah,
always take every
Yep.
single trade, never go face. Your health is just, what was it? Like just,
a resource.
yeah, a
A
resource.
resource?
It's just a resource to help you win. As long as you have 1 HP, that's enough. And so, like the first few times I got rushed down, I was like, it made me think. I was like, wow, that was, not just a fluke. That was like a solid game plan.
Hmm.
Maybe I should think about this game in a different way. And I played with Ekop, who is a lot more aggressive. And every time I was like, I want to trade here. He's like, why are we trading? You want to trade 7 damage into a 2/2? I was like, yeah, I want to trade a 7/7 into a 2/2. Like, just let me do it. He's like, no, go face.
Yes.
And more often than not, it would work out. Um, and kind of finding that balance of like, okay, when do I need to play for value? When do I need to just start racing him down? And like then I figured out what tempo was. Koyuki taught me how to think about my next turn, like turn planning. If you have like three
Hmm.
5 drops and you have a really good turn with like a 2 drop and a 3 drop, you should probably still play a 5 drop there. Stuff like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
So a lot of really clever
So
things that I learned. Hmm.
So it seems like what you're saying is self-evaluation was really important. Self-evaluation really helped you get from a bad player to the extremely good player you are now. But I think some people have, and they specifically ask about this. They ask us, how are you supposed to perform self-evaluation when you're starting off at a bad spot? Like, I can try to self-evaluate, but because I am not a good player right now, I don't even know how to begin this process of did I make a good decision versus how I made a bad decision. So what advice would you give these people? Like, how can they judge their decisions when they're not even sure of their decisions in the first place?
Well, Hearth Arena is a pretty cool tool. It actually is. I was really skeptical at first. A lot of people were bugging me about it, and when I tried it, it was pretty accurate. Um, so I was pleasantly surprised by that. And I still think like if you're a really great arena player, you can probably do better than a robot. But
Hmm.
for the most part, if you're a new player, it's a nice tool, and you don't have to pick every pick. But I think Hearth Arena even tells you why it's a better pick or worse pick in certain situations, which is some nice info.
Yeah.
Streams are another way to learn, right? You can just literally follow along what other streamers do, see why they're getting to
Mhm.
12, what kind of decisions and what kind of drafts they're making.
Yeah, I mean, I think
And
you talked a lot about how Trump and how ECOP and people helped you when you were learning the process of the arena, and maybe viewers or listeners don't necessarily have the connection to get
right.
Trump to do some one-on-one help, but you can still watch streams. You can hit the pause button, you can hit the play button. There's videos of people going 12 wins or just playing the arena at a very high level, and you can see if you make the decisions that the same people do. I like to say, and no one likes to hear me say this because it's kind of an asshole thing to say, but this game is 100% decision making. There is nothing else. So if you're not
Well,
doing well,
I-
it's
not
RNG,
100%.
RNG, right?
There is a small factor, right?
Of what?
RNG.
Oh yeah, of course. I don't mean the outcome is determinative, but over a large
Oh,
enough
okay.
sample size, right? Not
Yes,
like any
yes.
particular game or any particular run, but over a large enough sample size, if you're not doing as well as the top players, then you are making like more bad decisions than the top players are.
Hmm.
And so it's all about finding out what those bad decisions are. And that's it, right? Anybody can play at the highest level. You just have to think about it a lot, and you have to find a way to learn how to make these good decisions. And decisions aren't always, 100% good or like 100% bad. They're oftentimes 55% of the time that's a good decision, 45% of the time that's a bad decision, and that'll swing a game every like 20 times you do it. And so it gets really rough to figure that out. But if you listen to the logic of some streamers, they can. I think it is helpful because you'll start thinking in certain ways.
I mean, to be fair too, like when me, you, and Ratsma did that triple, we even had tides in there and had like
God.
quadruple arena run. We were
Four-way
arguing on
co-op.
every turn. Like
Yeah.
almost every turn, there was something to be said. There were different plays, and it's really interesting to see a lot of, very successful Hearthstone arena players come together and still have all these different lines of play.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
there's no one way to play the game.
Exactly, and that's one of the beauties of the arena. You were talking about playing a little faster with ECOP and then playing a little slower, a little more value-oriented with Trump. Everyone kind of develops their own style. So when you come to those 45, 55 decisions, if you're consistent in a certain direction, it would work. And I guess if you're a newer player, you just have to figure out when it is that 45, 55 decision and when it's something totally different, right? When it becomes more like 75, 25, and you probably really shouldn't do that. But it's a very flexible game in terms of your whole game plan and how it works with your deck. I thought that was the four-way co-op was really interesting, especially when we all came to different conclusions of how the same exact play.
It was pretty fun.
Yeah. I think it also just shows really how deep this game is and how in that four-way co-op, all of you guys were extremely good and all of you guys win at such a high rate. But if there were 4 different plays, it could be like a 49-51 decision, but only one of you guys could be right in the in the hypothetical universe where something is right. Only one of you guys can be right, and with that, you can see that like all these good players, 3 of them will be wrong, but they still average such a high win rate, which means even after you guys have played all these hours, even after all this experience, you guys can still make mistakes and still improve your game after being so good, and there's still that like next level to be reached, and who knows what Hearthstone perfection is. No one will ever reach Hearthstone perfection, I think, but it's out there somewhere.
Yeah, Hafu is you're like top 20? Like what happened? Why weren't you top 10?
I have no idea what it is now.
Right?
I think a lot of that is variance too. I mean, ghosting is a pretty big portion, right?
Yeah.
So like being a top ranked streamer is much harder than playing. Like I played by myself in my hotel room at PAX the day before Lord of the Arena, and I was winning so much more. Like, that's not even biased. I had some really crappy decks that went 10, 11 wins, and it's because I was able to play greedier, right? And like have those things pay off, whereas I can't really do that when I stream. When it becomes apparent that I feel like my opponent's ghosting, it makes me play a little bit differently. They're setting up turns. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I agree.
You actually draft MCT when you're by yourself?
Yeah. I can draft Blood Knight.
Card, right?
Like, Blood Knight hit, I think, 4 or 5 times in this one run, and I was like, wow, this is such a good card. It never hits when I stream.
And that brings me up to a question that I noticed. Almost all of the top streamers, you still use your own names when you are playing. I actually, we're not as big when it comes to streaming as you guys are, but we have our reach with the tier list and Hearth Arena. So when people see weird letters that begin with ADW, they kind of check. And I think I get ghosted a fair amount too. And recently I changed my my handle on Battle.net. So I'm no longer ADWCTA, and I now block it. So, I mean, you could find out probably. I'm sure it shows up on stream somewhere, or like I'm spectating somewhere.
People will find you.
People will find it.
Hunt you down.
But like a lot of people, 80% of the people who view our content now won't know that they're facing me when they're playing me, and that gives me like a peace of mind. So for people who are listening who don't know what ghosting is, it's just someone who figures out that they're playing against a streamer who's streaming it live, and then they go to their channel, and so they can see their hand, right, and they can see their deck. Streamers try to get around it sometimes by some people go as far as to cover the hand, which is kind of extreme, but others just don't show the deck or some other different ways. But I think it is definitely a real problem, and it does affect win rates. And I've gotten so even just paranoid about it to the point where I was changing my name, right?
I mean, that's just something you have to deal with. Like, I choose to not put on delay. I choose not to hide my name. I do choose to not put up the deck list because I feel like that's ridiculous amount of ghosting if someone knows exactly what's in your deck, right? They're like, oh, there's no Flame Strike here. Never play around it, ever. I mean, you can just take one look and it changes the entire way of how you play, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whereas in Arena, that's like half the game. People think it's not a big deal, but you're constantly figuring out what your opponent is trying to do. You're testing for what kind of removal they have before you fully commit, so you don't just get wiped out.
Yeah, it's a game of imperfect information, and when your opponent has a little more perfect information than you do, it's a whole different game. So let's move on to kind of so we've been talking mostly about like TGT meta and things that Arena players can do to improve on their play, but let's take a little detour right now and really talk about the Arena community, because this is also what this podcast is trying to do. We're trying to bring together people who play Hearthstone Arena into this community, the way that ranked play has, the way that the constructed scene kind of bears out. And one of the big pillars of the Arena scene right now, and the only competitive format, is this Lord of the Arena tournament. And it's done very successfully. It gets a ton of viewers, and I just want to talk a little for maybe like 10 minutes about the whole format and what an Arena tournament is, and maybe where we can go with that. So why don't you describe Lord of the Arena, Merps, just to kind of get us set up?
Sure. Lord of the Arena is a arena tournament by Temple Storm, and Lord of the Arena 4, more specifically, which was this about a week ago, was played by Brian Kibler, Reynad, Ratsma, and yours truly, Hafu. It was head-to-head. First round was Kibler versus Ratsma, with Ratsma coming out on top. Then it was Reynad versus Hafu. Barely. That was an exciting series.
It was great.
I think if Kibler won, there would have been a little bit of controversy with the redraft. But anyways, it was Hafu versus Ratsma in the finals, and two very epic games, and Hafu's Druid came out on top of Ratsma's Paladin at the end, and now you have Lord/Lady of the Arena here.
Don't slash lady. She specifically said Lord.
Sorry, that's my fault. Lord of the Arena.
All right. So one of the things that I was really happy about, and it doesn't always work this way, right? Because Arena is such a random format on a particular game basis. Each particular game probably, because of the decks and everything, has a little more random variation than one particular ranked game. It's a little debatable, but I think that generally holds true once you add the decks into consideration. So for these games, the format is you draft some decks. In Lord of the Arena's case, you draft 2 decks, and then you get to pick which one to play. You do a best of 5, and in the finals, you pick 1 deck, and then you do a best of 3.
You can pick any deck during these 2, by the way. Like, I could have switched over to both.
Oh, you could have switched back to your old decks?
No. In the first set, we drafted 2. Yep. In the second set, we only drafted 1 because of time, and that's why I like. Can I swear in this? I screwed up my draft. So I picked 3 Druid of the Claws and 3 Wildwakers because they were rushing me. They were like, on my headset, they were like, "You gotta pick fast. You gotta go."
Wait, like as you were drafting?
Well, right before I drafted, because
okay.
they told us to keep our same drafts. They're like, same drafts, best of 3. And I was like, no. I just said no. I said, that's dumb.
Yeah, that would have been terrible.
Yeah, so. Okay, so I rebelled. I said, that's dumb. And Rasmus was like, yeah, sure. He had such sick decks in the other ones. He would have crushed me. So I was like, no. I mean, even if I had the better deck, I think that's stupid because, like we just talked about, a lot of Arena is figuring out what your opponent is trying to do, right? So we just watched each other's matches. We know what's in each other's decks. There's no... That's not as skillful. It's not as fun. That's not like the point of Arena. So
I agree. Sorry, keep going.
No. They had us draft one deck each, and then it was a best of 3. So.
Yeah, I was even a bit, in my ideal world, right, an Arena tournament. So first of all, let me talk about the first point you brought up, which is that you accidentally drafted 3 Druid of the Claws and 3 some other card. And in one of those cards, what happened is the commentators remembered what your other 2 choices were, and you got to basically make the obvious, I think there were 2 choices. One was like really bad, and one was like kind of okay.
I actually take the worst one for most people. I take Naturalize over the 4-mana 3/5 dragon.
4-mana 3/5 dragon. Oh yeah.
Because my hand was too clogged, and I had a Violet Teacher, and I thought it would just give me a lot more tempo.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I mean, Naturalize is a very deck-dependent dependent card, and it can be really, really powerful. We've all had 12-win runs with Naturalize, and we've all not picked Naturalize many, many times over other bad cards. So it's very deck dependent. So in one case, you got to pick the card that your second choice card, basically, because you couldn't have 3 of the same ones. And you couldn't have 3 of the same ones because there's in Hearthstone, there's no way right now to set up an actual arena tournament. So you're kind of playing constructed matches just with a draft in the arena system beforehand, which is why these limits are in play. So hopefully Blizzard will lift them at some point and program this in. But the other choice, the commentators didn't remember what you were picking because you were going so fast. And so the resolution was just that you had to use a Wisp.
Yes.
Which how do you like Wisp? How much do you like Wisp? Right? Like, we think it's a bad card, but not an awful card. Do you think it's an awful card, or?
I'm pretty sure my other 2 picks were better, or my other 3 picks are. But I mean, when it popped up, I just kind of laughed. That was like, I was losing versus Ratsma in the first one when it showed up. But it actually did something, especially because Ratsma was holding back. He kept holding back over and over. So Wisp actually proved to definitely pull more than its weight. It won me the game, you could say.
And as soon as you drop Wisp, Ratsma immediately emoted, "I'm sorry."
Yeah.
As very, very good-manneredly, because I'm sure he realized what was up. It was very good-mannered. I thought he was like, "Oh, I'm really sorry. You know, you clearly screwed up somewhere, because otherwise, why would you ever take a Wisp?" So the other point that I wanted to get to that you were making is how the decks, you get 2 decks, it's a best of 5. So at some point, even if you weren't to recycle the decks, even if you get new decks, you still know your opponent's decks. It's still a rematch at some point, because you can't use all new decks to win a best of 5 unless you have at least 3 decks, but more reasonably 5 decks.
You're not seeing every card, right?
You still have
you do play the same person in arena sometimes. Haven't you played someone back to back, especially like at 10+ wins?
Yes, and I hate it. I hate it. It ruins my entire run's experience if I face the same person again.
Really?
Because they know my deck. I feel like this is not the arena when this happens.
But
I'm not saying I'm at a disadvantage. I'm not saying it's like getting ghosted, but I feel like it's not the pure arena experience. Obviously Blizzard's matchmaking works that way, but I would make it so you're not allowed to face the same deck within the same run ever. Like, just within the Hearthstone client.
Because 1, it doesn't happen that often, and 2, it's not like you don't know exactly what's in your opponent's decks. And I think remembering what they had and you can kind of formulate a new strategy against it. I think it's kind of fun. Like, it's not constructed where you know 28 out of the 30 cards, right? They play the first card, and you're like, okay, that's blah.
Yeah,
right? Yeah. That's way different than like you might know some key cards, and you'll remember certain ones that you're like, oh, he has a Blood Knight, right? Like, that card haunts me more than MC Tech, I guess. I keep bringing it up. Or like, he has MC Tech.
Hafu makes a good. Yeah, I think Hafu makes a good point that inevitably, whenever you're making any kind of arena tournament, it just won't be like queuing up in the arena period. If you're just playing the arena generally, you can't draft towards a specific person, and you're drafting towards just the general meta for the server. If you're in a tournament, you're going to be you at least know who your opponent is, so you can at least draft towards their kind of style. So already you don't have this kind of pure arena experience that I think you're talking about. So it's just going to be a different format. So the reusing of decks and knowing cards that are in your opponent's deck, it's not great, and it takes away from the quote-unquote arena experience, but it's a tournament, so it just has to be different, right?
And I will note that I definitely drafted much lower in Lord of the Arena than I usually do in arenas. We're not like racing to 12, right? Like, I did that challenge with Amaz where we both crafted an arena deck and we both tried to get to 12 as fast as possible. We both actually managed to do it. He beat me by like a minute, which is kind of fun though. But I did draft specifically against Ratsma to be as fast as possible.
Yeah, I was about to ask that.
Anti-aggro. I know I've collabed with him quite a bit, so I know what kind of cards he likes. I know that I think of myself as a tempo player, but he is like only tempo. He doesn't value anything that slows him down, even if it pays off. Like, he just wants to win by turn 6.
Yeah, I thought that was bold, because when you were drafting, I was definitely watching and thinking, wow, she's definitely drafting against Ratsma. And that was interesting because I know, Ratsma has a reputation in the Arena community for people who watch all the Twitch streams and know people. He goes very fast and he likes tempo. He's really good at it. But in his earlier match against Kibler, he actually picked two mid-rangey / even kind of slow decks that were very powerful, and he did not seem like he had a mindset that he was going to, definitely go for a fast tempo deck. And you saw that match right before your finals, and you still stuck with the idea that you think Rasmus was going to lean a bit more.
I thought he was going to go Paladin. I mean, I think every Arena player right now can say Paladin is the strongest. I've always thought Paladin was the strongest, by the way. But now it's even more so, right? And so I didn't get a Paladin draft, which I was kind of salty about. But I just figured, like, if he has the opportunity to, and he had a pretty high chance of getting it, that he would play Paladin. And of the matchups, I think Druid does the best. I don't remember what my other two options were. It's like Priest. Definitely not Priest. Priest versus Paladin
Priest
is just
awful.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
And it's like Warrior or Hunt is like something.
Warrior.
Yeah.
I remember it was Warrior because Crip and Frodam were making fun of the Warrior.
Like, oh yeah, I'll go for that Warrior. No. That's even worse than Priest.
Yes. Yeah, it's probably the only class worse than Priest, but it's worse than Priest by a fair margin, I think. Well, I don't know. Maybe I just hate on the Priest. I've been known to hate on the Priest.
Hunter seems
if you had picked the Warrior and won, though, I think they should have just given you War of the Arena 5 trophy right there. They should have even given you 2 global emotes.
You would have to change the word Lord, because Lord would no longer convey the power of using Warrior to win that tournament. Okay, so I think we touched upon most of the points we want to talk about when it comes to the Lord of the Arena. But one thing that I was curious about, I think you have like as much, if not more than anyone else in terms of tournament arena experience. What do you think about the format of this best of 5 draft 2 decks? And what would you do next time? Like if you were Tempo Storm, you're trying to set up Lord of the Arena 5. What kind of changes would you make, if any? And
allow classes. I mean, like, it's kind of dumb. Yeah. I mean, I felt I got shafted in the class selection, right? If I could have chosen, I would have gone Paladin, Paladin, Paladin. I mean, that's just what it would be. Choices. And that's not fair that some people got Paladin and Mage, right? Like, that's what Kibler got. And then, what did Rasmus go? Mage and Rogue? Right? I got Warlock and Rogue, which is still good. And then I got Druid, which is okay. But you can't argue that Paladin is the best, right? Like, that's not... It's just, like, statistically the best arena class by far.
I'm going to argue with you. I'm going to argue with you on that. Well, I'm not going to argue with you that it's statistically the best. It is statistically the best. If you go to all the players and you look at their averages, Paladin does beat everything else out right now. But I think Rogue and Mage are probably more powerful in the hands of like if you were to like dedicate yourself to be a Paladin player or a Rogue player or a Mage player, I think Rogue and Mage may come out ahead, or at least it's very even with the Paladin.
You want to take that challenge with me? I'll do 20 Paladin drafts. You do 20 Mage or 20 Rogue, and we can see our win rates.
Okay, some of us have day jobs and can't just do 20 Mage drafts in a short amount of period.
5? I mean, whatever you want. Like, variance is a key, which is why I said 20. But
I know.
Like, I just think that as good as people are, like, just the Paladin cards are better. Like,
I agree that the Paladin cards are better. Yeah.
Like, Muster for Battle, it's still broken, right? That's an old one. Yeah. And now you introduce things like Murloc Knight.
Okay, to be fair about the Murloc Knight, I think that card is getting, statistically, first of all, it's actually getting worse. Because people are figuring out, like the first 2 days was the most ridiculous card in the freaking world. Everyone died to it. Now, people are preparing for it. They're holding on to their 4 damage removals because they know a Murloc Knight is coming at some point. And if you can't remove that Murloc Knight... But it's already too late.
The damage is done by the time they play Murloc Knight and Hero Power.
No, that's kind of, it's a normal, you get normal value, right, with 6
So you have to hold off for, like, the fact, okay, it's a 4 mana, for 4 mana you get a 3/4, a random Murloc that could be something really good.
Like a 2.5, 2.5.
Another 3/4, or a 2/5.
Okay, but RNG, it's going to be like a 2.5, 2.5-ish. Maybe charge.
What's RNG? What's the average?
The average is like 2.25, 2.25, or something like that. But then they can also sort of have like charge. Yeah.
2/2. So you got a 3/4, a 2/2, and a 1/1.
For 6
mana. And we're assuming that you're somewhat on the board as well. Like the sheer number of bodies is what makes it so powerful. Yes, you might be able to deal with the 3/4, but then you have the 2/2 and the 1/1 and whatever else they're playing, right?
Yeah, I mean, value-wise, right? 3/4, 2/2, 1/1, 6 mana. That's about right. That's
Is
actually
it?
exactly right. Yeah, that's exactly what you should be getting for 6 mana. It is really clunky to try to remove all that because that's 3 things with 6 mana.
If there
But
was a
you
card,
only
a
have to
6-mana
remove
card,
one.
if there was a 6-mana
Think
card
about
that said
Silverhand
make a
Knight, right?
3/4, 2/2, and a 1/1, would you play it?
Yeah, it'd be a good card. I'm
Yeah,
not saying
no,
it's not a good card,
exactly.
but
And that's
it's
just
not.
the average.
It's not a game-breaking card,
It
right? The way
is
if it
because it
stays on
doesn't
for one
necessarily
more.
die, right? The
Right, but that's why
3/4
you
doesn't
hold that
necessarily
removal.
die.
I think when people aren't holding back their removals like they didn't in the first couple of days, it just wrecked you. Because if you get another Murloc out of that thing, you're screwed. Like the Paladin.
But what if you don't have the 4 removal? Like you can't always be in a position where you have these answers in your hand, right? Like,
But you can hold it, right? You have it in your deck somewhere. You're just more cautious about using it against the Paladin. And I think that's the effect we're seeing because that card has gotten from like God mode to like just one of the kind of really good Paladin cards, like a True Silver, like a Consecration, which are great cards, right? But they're not breaking the game exactly the way Murloc Knight. It seemed like it was breaking the game in the very beginning, right? The win rates were just off the charts. Anyway, we'll see how it goes.
People got used to the BRM meta, right? You know the importance of removal in your hand versus board presence. So if you had a removal, if you had a Shadow Bolt, if you had an Eviscerate, and if you know the meta, you know exactly how much that is worth coming out of your hand. And when the meta changes, you're not sure of it. So I think some people in the tempo meta previously, they spent that removal to try to get on the board. And then with the dilution of removals as well, after they've thrown out the removals earlier on turn 6 when Murloc Knight comes out, then this high priority target they can't exactly remove. And I think people just adjust to that. They know they don't have that many removals anymore. They know that if they can, they should use their board to trade earlier on instead. Let me keep this Eviscerate for the Murloc Knight or later on. And I think it's just like a small adjustment, valuing the removals that really shifted it from this God tier to just this really good tier.
Sure. We're gonna have to disagree on this one.
We're gonna disagree more. By the way, we were just talking about Lord of the Arena, so it was all nice and friendly. It's like, hey, Hafu won the Lord of the Arena. There's this great arena tournament. Hopefully, there's going to be more. This is like a good base to build off of, and we're gonna move on to things like what is good in this game, or like we were also talking about how you get better. These are not controversial topics, but now we're gonna move into TGT meta. And we're going to talk about cards and gameplay and strategy. We're a little behind on time, but this is fine. But before we move on to Deep Fried Meta, which is our segment where we kind of talk about what's good in the current meta, I want to wrap up the Lord of the Arena discussion with in terms of that segment, with just kind of, I think I mentioned this before, but in my perfect world of a tournament for the arena, getting on my soapbox here, I would actually have, and this is totally unmarketable, which is why I don't think anyone will do it, but maybe you can do the drafting ahead of time, where you would draft 9 decks for all 9 classes, and then in the best of 5, you would only be able to use each deck once. So you get to pick your 5 best decks, and you get to select which decks you use. It rewards people who are good with all classes, which I think when it comes to something like the arena, and you're kind of forced to pick all the classes, it does get that, it gets that skill into the arena tournament. And at the same time, it lets you pick, like you were talking about, it lets you pick the classes you're most comfortable with. But there's a little more RNG there if you're a little more focused, right? Like, let's say you're only really good with 3 classes and you're really bad with 3 classes versus someone who's good with kind of evenly with all the classes. Well, now if one of your 3 classes gets a bad roll on the draft, you're less flexible. You'll have to start using some of these other decks. Whereas the person who's good with all the classes would get a little bit of an advantage because they get some like backups. While not telling anyone, like, you wanted to play Paladin. Well, you'd be able to play Paladin in this format. It's a little clunky because who wants to watch 9 drafts? Or who knows, right? If they're actually drafting at your speed, the way how fast you draft, I don't think people will mind watching 9 drafts. But you could also, put that part off the screen, right? You don't have to necessarily show people picking the cards.
Sure.
So that's how I would do it. That would be my ideal tournament. I don't think it's going to happen because of what people's interests are, but I think that would be the most fair. Okay, that's my soapbox. I just felt like I needed to say that on the podcast before we move on to deep fried meta. And for deep fried meta, I'm actually going to kick this to Merps first. The question for deep fried meta today is we're going really, really general. We are the question, and there's only one question because between me, Merps, and Hafu, we're going to talk endlessly about this topic anyway. It's what exactly does slower mean in terms of the TGT meta? I think most people think the meta has gotten quote unquote slower, but that's not a very precise term in terms of what's happening to the meta. And more importantly, that doesn't really tell you what works best in this meta. So tempo is obviously still very effective. The tempo players haven't just like fallen off the map. You see tempo players like Rasma kind of like adjust a little and be a little more mid-rangey, but they still push really hard. Another tempo player we're really familiar with is Shady Bunny. He still pushes really hard, gets really great results. But on the other hand, Card Advantage now seems to work better too. We just got a 12-win mage with a total crappy deck, but we had like 5 card draws and like a lot of random big stuff that would never have worked in GBG. That's like a 5-win deck in GBG, and it was a 12-win deck in TGT because it worked out in this quote unquote slower meta. Board is still important, reach is still important. So what is slower, and how would you advise people on how to counter it, Merps?
All right, let's start this off. I think it's a really interesting question, mostly because I don't think there's a great answer for it. As you were saying before, BRM was all about tempo. You want to use all of your mana on every single turn. Getting that 1-drop was important. And on turn 4, if you were going tempo/aggressive, you could just drop 2/2s and just burn out your opponent. And they could have 5, 6, 9 cards in their hand. You could have none, but you win, right? Like it doesn't matter how many cards they have in their hand if you just tempo out really hard and use the initiative, be aggressive. Now, because of the card dilution, it's harder for your opponents to get the removal, get the flame strikes, get the consecrations. It's also tougher for anyone to draft a faster deck just because you have a lot of big cards, good big cards, or at least decent ones. You have Pit Fighter, you have Jormungar, you have all these big cards that, and this is the arena, you're forced to draft these cards as well. So tempo in that BRM definition is a lot harder. If I had to boil it down to one word, I think we're in a curve meta right now. I think curve is so important, which is a little bit different from tempo, because when you talk about tempo, it's just kind of like throwing stuff out there, right? Translating the resources from your hand onto the board and spending all your mana. I think curve is really important right now, just because number one, it's really tough to get a curve, because if you're filling out your later curve with 5 drops, 6 drops, 7 drops, and you're planning for those Mookless champion turns, for example, then it prioritizes you playing on curve a lot more. And if you miss a drop, especially if you miss a drop, it's tougher for you to come back because of that dilution. So the game is slower, so I don't know if it's a tempo meta anymore, but I think curve is still as important, if not more important these days.
Curve has always been important, but you're
It's
right,
always been
because
important,
there's
but
less removal, right? So
yeah.
when you have like a 6/5 versus like a 4/6, often people would just trade up somehow. And now that's a little bit more rare. Like you see people struggling to find that +1 damage, which is huge, right? Like a 6/5 killing a 4/6 and a 3/3 is very different than a 6/5 killing a 4/6 that got dark ironed, right?
Yeah, I think there's definitely a dilution effect going on there with buffs as well as with spot removals. And the biggest effect that I see is that I like engines so much more now. Like a Manatide Totem, like a Demolisher, things that were always like either good cards or okay cards are now, if they can just keep doing things one turn after the other, as long as they stay on the board, they've become much better, I think, because there is this lack of ability to keep removing stuff, right? Like
Funny
Murloc
that you
Knight
say
is one
that
of the
because
examples.
Inspire now. Yeah,
Yeah,
going back to
exactly.
Murloc
Inspires
Knight.
are engines, and
But
well, they're engines for some classes. For like a class like the Warrior, questionable whether they're engines in the beginning, but in the end game they are. So when you have an engine, whereas before you can remove it somehow, now whenever you can't remove it, it snowballs out of control at a much quicker pace. And if you don't have a board and you don't have a removal in your hand, you just lose. The board gets out of control with any engine on the board that has like given a Silverhand Regent, right? That would end the game if you just leave it alone.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
knowing that, I think the way to counter this particular quote unquote slow, and that's why it's slow, right? Because engines take time to build up. So while you have an engine on the board, you're not focused on face damage. You're just focused on preserving this engine so you get the card advantage in tempo every single turn, whatever that may be. So the way to fight against it is one of the concepts I was talking about a little earlier, which is that you really have to treasure any kind of buffs, any kind of removal that you have in your hand. Use it only when absolutely necessary, because your opponent is going to have an engine. Whereas before, they may not have had an engine in their entire deck. Now, with all the Inspire cards and everything, they are going to have an engine. They're going to be looking for a way to make that stick on the board. So if you have the board, that's completely fine, right? You can just attack, and then you can kill the engine if it ever comes out. But if you don't have the board, rather than, when you're making that tempo play with your removal and dropping the minion at the same time, you have to make that really count. Because if you do that and then they stick a engine on the board afterwards, your swing turn was useless, right? You haven't really swung the board. You've just kind of set it up nicely for your opponent to continuously engine stuff out, like hide behind a taunt or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, AoEs are even
Yeah.
stronger now than they were as well.
Mhm.
It's kind of dumb. It's really dumb. Like, wow, you have 2 flame strikes in this meta. Grats, dude. You know, I don't play around the second flame strike nearly as much as I used to. Back then, you could have like 3 or 4 in a deck, right? Now it's like kind of rare to even see
Yeah.
1. It is a common, but it's just like we've been saying, so diluted. You're not really getting like on average, how many non-minions are there in a deck?
7.
Really?
Yep.
That's a lot.
Really? It used to be more. It used to be like almost 9. It got diluted down.
I think it's even less than that. I mean, maybe you're looking at mages and rogues where there's more spells, but I want to say it's like 25 minions.
No, for classes without spells, if you're like talking about warrior or whatever, you have weapons, which is also non minions. But yeah, on the global average for non minions is something like 7.
Oh, I see. Wow.
But they're not all like removals, right? A lot of them could be like utilities. They could be like secrets. They could be a spell that creates a minion, like an animal companion, which is technically a spell, but it does drop a minion. So
Unstable portal.
yeah,
Bullshit.
unstable portal, things like that. So your actual like things with initiative in your hand that you can play and affect the board, the way you would normally think of as like a spell, that's probably a lot less, right? That's probably more like maybe
Right.
like 5. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the important thing to establish as well is the meta hasn't settled yet. And the arena meta usually after an expansion it takes a while to settle, but after it settles, it's not like the constructed meta where someone can just come in with a crazy deck to counter the top deck and then it's cyclical, right? And then that top deck gets knocked down by another deck. Unless it's Patreon, which is always in top, but hopefully Wizard figures that out. But the arena meta, it just takes a while to settle, and then nothing really changes just because there's no deck innovators. You're just drafting. But I think it will take some time because everyone who has played arena is kind of set in their ways. And right now we have to it's tough for me to think like, no, I just have to play into this flame strike, or no, I have to hold back. And because I played so much that I'm just going by feel now, and I know sometimes in my head I'm like, no, they can't have this consecration, like stats, it just doesn't, like, it's not worth playing around the second consecration. But it's tough to really get that into my play style. And I think after a while, there's going to be this back and forth between players, and you'll just know how many, like, what you can expect on a certain turn as well. Like when we first started, I could expect the Boulder Fist Ogre on turn 6. I couldn't expect the Murok Knight tap. So 3/4, 3/2, or 2/3, and then 1/1. Like there was just nothing on turn 6 that varied the board by that much. But now you kind of anticipate that, and I think it'll still take a couple of weeks for that to settle. And once it settles, we could have this conversation again, and there could just be a definite answer to this question.
Yeah, That sounds good, and I think we about cover the generalities and how the meta goes. Hopefully, people can apply that to their own games when they're thinking about it. Like Hafu mentioned before, everyone kind of has their own styles, and a lot of styles work. So as you're developing your own personal style, these are all things that are very useful to consider. And when you do things and it works better, you go in that direction a little more. When you do things and you get punished for it, you maybe do that a little less. You'll settle around into this nice area. And a meta shift is always a good time to get a lot better in the game very quickly, because a lot of the very good players are stuck in their ways, or they're not adjusting as quickly. And if you're kind of getting how to be an infinite player, but you're like missing one piece or you're missing a few pieces, the meta may change, and those pieces that you were missing may no longer be relevant. So you just have to pick up the new pieces, and you'll end up being okay as well. So it's definitely a time when big shifts happen. I know, and I've talked about this before, when GVG happened, I personally got significantly worse. Like, my win rate dropped by 0.5, while a lot of other really good players, their win rates didn't drop at all. And some players, their win rates went up. So it wasn't like a whole, like, oh, there's too much RNG for good players to do well. It's just I didn't adjust as well as other people. By the time the end of GVG was happening and BRM was happening, I was back to my my old 7.4 wins per run kind of rate, and because I had finally fully adjusted to it. So good news so far on TGT is that I feel like I'm at least adjusting normally. My win rate hasn't fallen, but we're trying to work on that and get it to be even higher. Okay, let's move on to, we're going to tick through the rest of these topics a lot faster. This is not going to be a 3-hour podcast, as people in the chat are saying. We are going to play games after this. Question from the GOAT. If you could eliminate one card from the game, Hafu, what would it be?
MC Tech.
Just immediately.
It's got to be MC Tech.
It's just not a fun card. It's just not a fun card to play against.
It's got to be MC Tech.
Like, it's too random.
Yeah.
The swing, I mean, I've explained it on my stream, but even if you take, like, a 1-1, right, that swing is, like, it removes it from their side of the board, puts it on your side. I mean, that's actually a shitty one. But let's say, like, a 2-2 even. That's 4 stats. So for 3 mana, you have 6 stats from your MC Tech, and you remove 4 stats from their end, and you put it on your side. So it's 8 plus 6. It's 14 stats for 3 mana, right? Like, it's just, like, so ridiculous. And that's a shitty example. Imagine, like, a 6-7. Or we've all kind of lost to it by taking, like, the 1 out of 4. And that's just like, what do you do? I mean, that's ridiculous to me. Dumb card.
And some people talk about MC Tech. It's like, well, you have MC Tech, you have Blood Knight, you have BGH. But no, MC Tech is very different from those cards, because Blood Knight and BGH work both ways similarly. I can BGH you, you can BGH me. The skill level there doesn't differ. But if you're a good player, and if you're an infinite player especially, you're going to need to grab the board. You will have the board more often than your opponent is going to have the board. And you can't just draft MC Tech and be like, oh, well, I'm just going to wait for them to have 4 minions and then play MC Tech. You're going to lose more often then. So MC Tech actually punishes you. It's the only one of those huge swing cards that punishes you for being good, because your opponent, when they have MC Tech, it's a win condition for them. It purely cuts into your win percentage if you're a good player, and if you're a bad player, it just elevates your win percentage, which obviously makes me a little bit salty. So it's different from Blood Knight and BGH, because those are equal. Like, if someone BGHs me, I'm like, fine, there's nothing I can do. But MC Tech, all it does is punishes you for grabbing the board and being good at the game. And yes, I understand. People will say you can play around it. I mean, sometimes you can play around it, sometimes you can't. But it's a frustrating card, definitely.
Yeah, okay. I get that. I mean, that is true. I'm actually, now that you say it, I'm trying to think of another card where the badness of why it's a bad card is not just RPS, art, rock, paper, scissors, where it's a hard counter to certain things that you can play. And it's not just that, oh, there's a ton of RNG, and RNG always evens out the playing field, so you lose your edge as a good player. But to actually punish you even more for being good.
Spellslinger, Flamestrike.
Okay, that's true. Spellslingering into something.
Highlighted Doomsayer. But those are very rare in comparison to what MC Tech can do.
Okay, no, that's true though. Like, if you piloted Shredder into a Doomsayer, I think that's a good example of something that definitely punishes good players more than bad players, and is RNG on top of that. So I hear you guys, but I think MCT is a nuisance in the arena, but I'm less concerned about losing to it, because it is It is a rare card. Is it epic rare? I
Rare.
really don't know this game. It is a rare card, and you don't see it that often. A lot of
I
players don't
see
like
it
to
more
pick
often.
it.
Rares are not that rare.
Okay, so you see it here. I don't get MC Tech all that much. I rarely ever play around MC Tech. I don't know. Maybe I'm just getting lucky. But I see it as a slight nuisance. What really annoys me all the frickin' time is a Noyotron. And not just because it has it in its name. A Noyotron for 2 mana puts out 2 taunts. And what these 2 taunts you have to get through, and they come in really early. And so it has the potential to completely change the shape of the board and your expectations for what you can do to the board. It's not the same as something like a Sunwalker, as something like a Sludge Belcher, where it takes their turn and they can't do other things to the board, like remove one of your key minions that it would take to get through the taunt, or like, they could drop an engine to hide behind it. Once the possibility of a 2 mana 2 taunt comes in, and it's for any class. So it's not even like, oh, this is mage. It's like a mirror image, or like, oh, it's a shaman. This is 3 mana for the feral spirits. This is any class, and it's a very, very powerful swing effect. It is a card that you have to use well. So this is not one of those like, oh yeah, noobs use this card and win games. It's kind of the exact opposite. It's one of those cards that it takes a while to set up. You have to know when to play it to get the biggest effect out of it. But the swing, I just don't like the game design of it, in that I think the swing on the board is too big for the arena and your expectations in it. So it's something that you see too often and you can't take into account. You can never like play around in a Noyotron, or at least you probably shouldn't, and then it screws you over. So,
I've actually not. I've never been like, wow, that. I mean, I've been like, damn, that Noyotron's annoying, but I haven't been like, wow, that Noyotron won in the game. Like, I can't think of
really,
a single time where that's happened to me. Yeah,
they
because I mean, at the
Noyotron and
end
go
of the day, it's
face. They
still just like,
Noyotron with Murloc Knight. They Noyotron with a Noyotron
hmm,
Murloc Knight tap is turn 8 play. Tap hero power.
it's very specific. And if you have a flame strike, it doesn't matter anyway.
Okay, if you have a flame strike, a lot of things don't matter if you have a flame strike.
I mean, like, how badly are you losing on the board at this point if you're losing to a Noyotron? I feel like you're already losing if you can't get through.
But if you set up like my minion trades with your minion, or I have 2 minions, and so one of them will be around even if you remove it to trade into your minion, and then you get a Noyotron. That's like a double layer taunt. You can have 3 minions and you'll still get a Noyotron blocked. Right? If you have 3 minions, they put out an Noyotron and remove your minion. Or they put out an Noyotron, trade one of their minions to one of your
But I mean,
minions,
you're
and
treating a Noyotron like it's not a minion. It's still a minion. Like, yeah, it takes 2 hits
it takes
more
2
often
hits
than
and it has
not.
taunt. I wouldn't mind it if it didn't have taunt, or if it only took 1 hit.
Okay, yeah, yeah, I understand this, but like, at the end of it, it's still just like, it's still a minion. Like, it's still just a card. It's annoying, but you're not really losing too much on your board unless they're setting up for some sort of AoE. I don't know. I don't agree with that. I
Okay.
haven't found a Noyatron to like lose me games yet.
I lose to it so often when there's an engine hiding behind it, or something that like I need to remove, and I don't have a spot removal that's enough. Right? I was relying on the whole buffing the board thing to remove it instead.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to take another aside right now and talk about just some news that happened in the arena that I feel like we need to cover. I made a video on this. Crip made a video on this. This originally happened on the Angry Chicken podcast, which, if you're new to the podcast space, maybe because you were there because of us, rather than just you like podcasts. The Angry Chicken is the most popular and the biggest and the most general, covers everything kind of podcast, and they get all these great guests on there. And Ben Brode stopped by the Angry Chicken on Monday for their 100th episode, and he took some questions, and Dills from the Angry Chicken asked him about Arena Warriors Matter and what they were doing with the arena. And Ben Brode, to the surprise of me, to the surprise of Dills, and probably everyone else, because Blizzard doesn't really like toss out information about this stuff, and they actually haven't tossed out any information about the arena since like last year around this time. Ben Brode gave a really thorough answer as to how they think about the arena. And I'm just going to stop by some highlights now. If you want to hear more about it, you can watch the video on our YouTube, ADWCTA, or you can just kind of Google it. You can go listen to the Angry Chicken podcast, episode 100. It's one of the last interview questions for Ben Brode. And the big points is, one, the TGT cards are actually more frequently offered in the arena than other cards. And we went into Hearth Arena, and we got some stats out, and it's 25% more. So you're 25% more likely to see a TGT card than any other expansion card or like even classic cards. And that adds even more to the dilution effect. So the dilution effect is a little stronger than we thought it was going to be, and TGT cards are more impactful. So that's why you're seeing a lot of TGT class cards come out. 25% may not sound like a lot, but when you put it on as a multiplier on something like the class bonus, which is 100% more, now you have 2.5 times, right? Like a Murloc Knight is seen 2.5 times as often as a Mechanical Yeti. It's a big difference.
Yeah.
And then okay, and so when Blizzard designs cards, they obviously don't think about the arena. But when they assign rarities, they do apparently think about the arena. It's just that they also think about complexity when buying cards. This is the exact quote from Ben Brode: complexity when buying cards. And what it means is they don't want the common cards that people to get to be too complicated, because then people will be kind of turned off by the game, or they'll think that it's too hard. And sometimes this complexity when buying cards rule wins out over arena rarity, even though most of the time they consider arena rarity, which that's just how they do it. We obviously, as arena players, don't like that. And there's also sometimes, right, one's the theory of how they do it, right, which is one matter, and then the reality of how they implement it, which I think is probably going even more off the rails with the Warrior in the latest expansion. But they have also said, Ben Brode has stated flat out that Warriors have the worst hero power, and that they will get, the only way to balance the Warrior is to make great common cards, like almost overpowered common cards for the Warrior. So they recognize the problem, and they know exactly how to fix it. And so I'm kind of connecting the dots here, but I think what this means, and they said that arena balance is very important to them. So I'm hoping what this means is that Warriors are going to get a really powerful class common in the next expansion, and then also be on the more powerful side on the commons, if not still really powerful commons, like the most powerful commons in the expansion after that, so that they can balance it.
Do you like that though? I mean, we like it like Fire Elemental, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like back in Classic.
Yep.
And that was kind of like how good your Shaman deck was, how many Fire Elementals you
Yes.
drafted. I mean, is that what you want to see? I mean, it's obviously not the same now because there are more cards,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like back then you could literally get like 4 or 5 Fire Elementals, but now because there's so many more cards, you're not really going to get 4 or 5 of the same card ever.
Yeah, and it depends on the card. Fire Elemental is one of those way too flexible cards that you can never
Yeah.
have too many of. Whereas you take other like really good cards, right? Fiery War Axe is called the Fiery Win Axe for a reason. It's
Yeah.
because that's what you needed as the Warrior to win in the arena back in the day. Now it's not even close to being enough because of cards like Annoyotron. And
Oh
and
man.
2/2 with 4 health.
NC
we
Tech
have
is
not.
statistically better on Warrior though, because they are always losing on the board.
It's true. A lot of cards that are problematic is better for the Warrior.
Coliseum Manager.
Coliseum Manager from last week's discussion. So I agree. It's not the best way to balance the arena to make these overpowered cards, but there's not much Blizzard can do at this point. I think they've kind of painted themselves into a corner where they're not going to go back and readjust the rarities. So the only thing they can do is to release new cards, and the only way to get the Warrior better is to release new cards that are really good for the Warrior. I do agree that I would want a card more along the lines of a Arathi Weaponsmith than along the lines of Fire Elemental in terms of how good the card is, right? Like I would be very satisfied with adding like a Murloc Knight for the Warrior. Well, not exactly like the Murloc Knight, because the hero power for the Warrior doesn't do anything, so you don't want to have to force the Warrior to touch that. But I think that there is a big difference between the Fire Elemental and the Arathi Weaponsmith, where one is balanced but really good, and one is imbalanced, and your deck quality like changes greatly because of how many of those you have. And even the Fire Elemental, it's not a muster for battle, right? That card.
Right.
Okay, and so one more point that Ben Brode mentioned is that we're going to have golden cards in the arena. How happy are you about that, Hafu?
I don't care.
Not very happy.
I don't
You don't
care
like
about
sparkly
aesthetics.
things? No? It's not one
I
of
am
those.
super excited about
Yeah,
this.
we like sparkly things.
Yeah.
So how's that gonna happen? Like if you own the golden card?
Yeah, if you own well, they're throwing around ideas, right? But the current idea they're working with is if you own the golden card, or maybe if you own 2 copies of the golden card in your collection in Arena, it would just pop up, or there's like a checkbox that you can put so that you would either see golden cards or it would all be not golden. But that's, I mean, I'm very excited about that. I don't like a lot of the Arena constructed integration they do, but that's just me. I play mostly Arena. Overall, I think it's probably a good development for the game. But just to see golden cards, I don't care how you get it. I'm going to collect cards. I love opening packs. I love getting golden cards. In the Arena, one of your biggest rewards at getting 12 wins, right, is guaranteed golden cards. You get an extra pack too, but your gold amount between 11 wins and 12 wins is not that much more.
No, it's less.
It's less, right? Exactly. It's actually a tiny bit less.
Yeah.
But what actually does get raised a ton is your percent chance to get a golden card. It like triples. The best way to get golden cards by far is to keep getting 12 wins in the Arena. And so there's some kind of synergy there.
Sure. Sounds good.
And
I've never cared about aesthetics, but it is cool. Sorry.
Okay. So you're just a total buzzkill and not a fun
I'm
person.
sorry. It's so cool. I'm so excited.
Just a serious tournament player. Like I am Hafu. I win tournaments. I don't care how the cards look as long as they perform their function and their role in my deck.
Yeah.
Okay. And I know Merps, I know you had a very good suggestion about golden cards that you talked about on stream at one point.
Yeah, I was saying how you only get to use the golden version of a card if you reach 12 wins with that card, which means we're going to see gang ups everywhere.
Whoa! Really?
Yeah.
Wait, is that fact or is that your idea?
No, that's my idea. That's not fact. That's not fact.
I love that.
It's great, right?
Oh my god, I love that idea.
Got the Hafu seal of approval.
Oh my god, I love it. Because then you can just have like a giant E-peen, because that actually signifies something. You owning the cards, yeah, you have money.
Exactly.
So, you know, shit. Or like you have a golden warrior, you've played 500 patron games, grats. But
see,
sorry, go ahead.
No, I think this would literally plummet my win rate down like 2 to 3 games, because here's what would happen. Because your initial thinking is, okay, I would draft gang up to get it to gold, but that's not the true E-Peen. In order to really show it off, you need
have to keep playing
gang up every single time after that to show your opponent that, look, I not only reached it with the 12, I'm showing it to you, and I'm going to beat you with gang up. And that's awesome. That's what you do with gang up, Ancestor's Call, Totemic Might. That's what you have to do with these cards.
Oh, I mean, there's no way they're going to do that, but that would be so cool, because then, like, the moment at which you get a fully golden deck, at that point, like, if it was like Wisp over like a good card and I had a golden Wisp and it was like the last pick somehow, I mean, it's impossible, but I would still take the golden Wisp, you know? Yes. Just like have that golden coin for the first time. Oh, damn it, I love that idea, and now it's never going to happen. I hate you. Dreams crushed.
Hey, if we push hard enough, I feel like we may be able to get it to happen. We've already, I think this hashtag ArenaWarriorsMatter thing and all the support that it's gotten from everywhere in the community, and especially like people upvoting it and using it, like using it and sharing it is the biggest thing, right? Because that's what gets Blizzard's attention. It's already gotten them to give us information, at least, about the Arena. I mean, we have all the stats, but we weren't actually looking at them, so we would not have found this TGT thing, like TGT card percentage raising thing, for like months. And then we'll like call it out at some point and be like, oh, by the way, guys, we probably should have been looking. So this information stuff is already happening, and they already want to make golden cards. So maybe this is it could be something that that we can
to bully Blizzard into getting what we want.
Come on, if the whole entire Arena community comes together and says this is the way to make golden cards happen in the Arena, not this like ranked integration. I don't know. I think we could get their ear. You know, whether it happens or not. Maybe we win the next battle. Maybe we don't win this one. But it's such a good idea. Right? Anytime anyone hears this, hears Merps talks about it, they always like have the reaction of, oh, yes, this is clearly the way to do it.
Yeah,
Arena players, right? Awesome. It is just the best way.
What is the percentage of Arena players in the, like you keep saying Arena community? Yeah. Do you know?
I don't know the exact numbers. Only Blizzard knows. From like random polls that are on Reddit of people who use Reddit, it's something like almost half the people play Arena in some capacity, and about a quarter play Arena primarily and or just as much as ranked. So it's definitely less than the constructed scene, which is weird to me because in Magic the Gathering, which was the big card game before Hearthstone and still the second biggest card game, the limited scene, both in tournaments and in terms of players, is so much larger. Well, not so much larger, maybe in like a 2/3 to 1/3 ratio compared to the constructed scene, I think. I looked up those stats at some point. So I think the development, as the game gets more mature, will push people more, especially veterans, more to the Arena. than to constructed play, just because it creates more variations, right, on the board, and it like stimulates you like a little bit more. Whereas constructed becomes more about deck building, and then after the deck building, it just becomes more about memorizing.
But one's free and one's not, right?
I mean, they're both not free.
Well, you can play
One is
constructed.
very expensive, but
Okay. Well, yeah, but you get some gold, and then arena. If you're going to buy packs, like what are you going to use your gold on once you get it in rank, right? You're going to use it on packs. There's no other thing you can use your gold on. So if you use it in the arena, you only have to be so good to be able to get your packs back. You have to get.
Oh, I'm saying arena is what you have to spend money on. Like
Right.
constructed feels more permanent, right? Like if you spend the money in it, like I feel like people think spending money in arena is like a waste. Like, oh my God, I just wasted that.
Well,
They
you
almost-
compare it to getting packs. You can't compare it to playing ranked. But if you compare it to like buying a pack, right? You get some games out of it. You get to play in the arena, and you get the potential for a bigger reward. So as long as you're averaging like more than 3 wins, it's more financially worth it for you to play arena than ranked with the gold you already have, right? Not like you should be paying $1.50 to be playing the arena.
Sure. It's just like constructed, you keep your cards forever. I feel like people feel that it's like, yes, you get the pack from arena. I understand what you're saying.
Mhm.
But I feel like people are more inclined to buy packs in their arenas with
Yeah.
money. Not
Yeah, and
raffles.
that's one of the points Ben Brode brought up, which is that in ranked, people are much more incentivized to buy packs.
Right.
And that's more Blizzard's problem in terms of how they monetize it.
Yeah, of course.
They could just like force you to buy like one more pack whenever you enter the arena, right? Like just take another 100 gold out of your pockets, or like another whatever much packs costs,
Right.
and then give you an extra reward at the end. So
They
they can do
should
anything they want.
they should let me give away my gold.
Right? They should let you buy packs to other people.
Yeah, they should let me. Well, I don't think they would ever do that because then botting would be such a big problem.
That's
but,
true. That's true.
It would be so nice to like give out my gold.
hmm Or even to just
24,000.
use actual real cash to buy packs for people, because it'd be a much easier way to do giveaways and things like that. And I think they'd earn more money. But anyway,
They would.
going off topic, let's come back to the arena. We have 2 more topics before we're done for the day. Well, we're not done for the day. We're done with the podcast. And this is the next one is Card Good Bad, which is one of our favorite segments because we get to tell people whether a card is good or bad. And we let Hafu pick the card this time. And so it's not really going to be telling people whether the card is good or bad. She actually picked a card where there is going to be good discussion on whether this card is a little better or a little worse. So Hafu, why don't you start us off?
I don't think it's an amazing card, but I think that it's playable, and I think it's more than playable. It's something you can slam on turn 3,
So
and
why don't
yes.
we say what card it is first?
Oh, it's Ice Rager. Oh,
There
yeah,
we go.
sorry. I thought people knew because it's on the list. But Ice Rager, it's a 3-mana 5/2, just infinitely better than the Magma Rager, which is a 3-mana 5/1. And yeah, I think it's actually a lot better than people think because it blocks the 4-drop. And I was actually playing it in constructed. I mean, I wasn't playing that card, but I was playing the Druid of the Flame, and I was making it into a 5/2, and I was getting pretty good results with that. Granted, that's constructed as well, but just like one, they have to answer it, right? Like they need a 2 damage removal, and like we've talked about, removal's been diluted. You're not seeing as much removal in people's hands. So one, they have to have it. 2, if they don't, then it blocks their 4-drop, right? And you're still aggressing on the board. Like I think it's a lot better than what people think. Because before, if someone plays like a 3/4 and you play a Yeti, that is very free, you know? Like
Yeah.
that Yeti is just going to eat 2.
So how good do you think it is? Would you take it on pick 1 over a 2-drop? Like a 2/3 or a 3/2 plain
It
old
depends on what
2-drop?
class, because some
Major
classes
Pally.
choose.
Let's just start with the normal ones.
Probably not, because I think I'd probably take the just a 3/2 like a raptor. Or wait,
Yeah,
what's
like a
the-
raptor, a ship's cannon, a croc, a puddle stomper.
I'd
Discount the
probably take the
Murloc
Ice Rager.
synergy.
I actually think it's better because on classes that you can miss your turn 2, it's pretty good. On classes that you can't, you need the 2s. Like you just need to collect them all. Like priest, hunter, warrior, take
Yeah.
the 2.
Okay, that's
But
interesting. Yeah.
it's-
So for the classes that don't desperately need 2s, you would take the Ice Rager. For the classes that desperately need the curve, you start off with the curve.
I think it's interesting when you talk about that you can pick the Ice Rager after missing 2, because that's what I see as the downside, that if you're first on the board, Ice Rager becomes better. If you're second on the board, Ice Rager just dies to anything that they can possibly play on the turn before, right? Like every 2-drop kills it. Um, with the exception of like an Annoyotron or
Do you
something
agree
like
that
a
you
10.
can't miss your 2-drop anymore?
I I don't agree. I've had plenty of success missing my 2-drop in TGT. I don't think it's
What?
gotten worse than it has before.
Really?
I know Merps was talking about how important the curve is. I do agree that it's very important. I obviously don't want to miss my 2-drop. But I have come back a fairly significant amount of times just by playing bigger stuff and then winning eventually on card advantage because my opponents just go to my face a lot less often. I'm sure if they were better players, they'd probably figure it out and go face and I'd be screwed. But I don't think the meta is at. I don't feel like in this meta it's difficult enough. Like not enough players are going face that you can recover just with like big stuff and taunts and maybe a board clear or something.
Uh, hmm.
I'm not sure if it's more or less important than it was before. And Admiral, to what you were talking about before, people are going face more often. Yeah, I definitely, or sorry, they're not going face
Less.
as often. Yeah, I definitely see that as well. And I think that will change with time too. People are just not used to what you can produce in a certain amount, like a certain turn. So people are more reluctant. And this is what we're talking about, the meta, being unsettled right now.
Well,
And once the meta settles, people will, I think, go face more often because they'll have that confidence, just because they'll know what to expect on a certain turn and be more confident that they can finish you off.
I actually think it's a lot better to trade more. It's a lot more minion fights. Like removal is so precious, right? We just kind of argued about, keeping the Eviscerate or Shadow Bolt for that Murloc Knight.
Mm.
Um,
Hmm.
so you are taking the free trades when you can, so that when something is like, oh crap, that's a Murloc Knight, or that's a uh, what is it? The 3/5 Kodo thingy, Kodo Wolf. What is it?
Kodo Rider?
Cold
Kodo
Rider?
Rider.
Yeah.
Let's get
There's the Inspire
moving.
cards that need to be answered to right away, or you lose, right? Some inspired cards, if you can't deal with it the first time, like by the second time, it's too much value, and the game's over.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't
But
know if
like
it's
on
better
turn
to go
3 and
for
turn
this.
4, like that's what we're talking about with
Right,
the
Ice
Ice
Rager.
Rager. And I think you're both right in that if you have the board and then the Ice Rager solves all of your problems and you prevent your opponent from establishing himself again without doing something like consecration or something. But like the normal stuff wouldn't screw you, and it's one of the most difficult things to deal with on the board. It's like um, a Cobra, right? Where it's
Right.
almost guaranteed
Yeah,
to kill
I
the
like
stuff
that.
out with like one less health, but with a lot more face damage if you needed to go face. And Cobra is a very good card. Um, the the difference is a Cobra wouldn't die to your opponent's 2/3. It would die to a 3/2, but it wouldn't die to a 2/3. So it's like a little more durable, and it also won't get removed by some of the board clears that your opponent may have. So the Ice Rager is a little more vulnerable
Cobra
on
dies to. I mean, it could get silenced. I mean, yeah, that's a little bit more
right.
extreme.
There's a lot more ways to deal 2 damage than 3 damage, right? That's like a very
That's true.
important damage threshold. So the Ice Rager is just a little more iffy on the board. And just we rate Ice Rager, I think, at like a 40 or somewhere around a 40, which means it's significantly lower than a 2-drop in our eyes. And it's better than terrible cards, but that's kind of it, right? Like it's better than a Nightblade, but it's not going to beat out like even or I think we may have it the same as like Isis Snapjaw or like somewhere around there. It's
You
just
think
not a
Oasis
card
is a
you want.
40?
Are you
Poor
going to
O.
defend the Oasis now too? This card good bad just got real.
I think Oasis is fine. I mean, it's
Yeah?
not my favorite card,
Do you
but
like it or a generic 3/5 for
I
format?
mean, the Maiden of the Lake is just a better turtle now, right?
Yeah.
Like, there are some 2/6s that are just better than the two, like the 1 HP is insignificant, but the 6 HP set, 7 HP is really nice. You don't think so? Like, especially when people are flooding, right? And you're constantly having to remove multiple creatures that have like 1/1s or 2/2s or whatever. Uh,
Yeah.
I
Also,
think
this
often that always is nice.
Twitch chat has made this comment very often whenever I'm using Maiden of the Lake, and I say how good it is, which is that, yep, 1 less health makes it a much better card, because I always talk about how bad Oasis Snapjaw is, when like about half the time their functions on the board are kind of similar.
I mean, you can
But
do so much with a turtle too. It's something that sticks on the board that helps you trade up, right? So it really depends on what your deck has. But if you do have like Argus or Dark Irons or Lance Carrier is great. Do you like Lance Carrier?
We have it around the same as a generic 2-drop. We don't like it, or at least I don't like it. Merps, you can talk more about it. I'm like dominating the conversation.
I think it's fine. When we were doing the tier list ratings, this is one of the few cards that I liked more than you, right? Yeah. And I was saying it's, it's not as good as an Abusive Sergeant, but Abusive Sergeant is a really good card. And with the stickiness on the board, and this translates to...
But it's forever. It's a forever buff.
Yeah, it is forever. Yeah. Which is sometimes relevant. We're used to look at the Dark Iron Dwarfs buff and how it, you just use it to trade up and the thing dies. But that makes a big difference. And especially what you were talking about on turn 4, 6 health minions on turn 4, the Maiden of the Lake and the Frigid Snowbolt. It has changed the dynamic of turn 4, I think. Because before, unless you were the mage, you were facing a mage, and you could expect a water elemental, which has 6 health. Nothing has 6 health. But now, these 2 very common cards have 6 health, and it just makes... Yeah, well, in addition to your favorite card, Hafu, the turtle.
Sorry.
Oh, man, I actually forgot about that card. Rip Mogushan. Sorry, Mogushan. But these 2 cards, which are pretty common, and we have them rated, like fairly average or below average for the Snowbolt, you see them more often, and it just makes the board really complicated starting on turn 4 now, because you're used to 3 health on turn 2, 4 health on turn 3, and then so on. Add 1 HP per turn, and suddenly you add 1 HP to turn 4, and you don't have enough to get rid of it. And this is where kind of the game begins, where you try to clear the board, but you usually don't have enough power, and you can either board clear, in which you don't have enough, or you can buff, like with the Lance Carrier that we were talking about. And I think that's kind of where the Lance Carrier shines, because you started from turn 4. It's more likely that you just don't have enough to remove now.
Oh, okay. I still don't like those kind of cards, because they're all still kind of situational. You can't just put them down. The situations happen fairly frequently, but it's still not the true flexibility, right? Like, we talk about why the Paladin hero power is kind of the best in the Inspire world, and it's because you can do it whenever and it'll do stuff. Mage has a great hero power, but if you have nothing to ping and you really want to Inspire, it doesn't quite work out. So there is a benefit to that, and as a drop, as a 2/7 on an empty board, or a 2/7 in like random situations, it's a little lackluster, and in the right situation, it could like absolutely dominate. So okay, let's move on to our last topic before we wrap this up. It is the class discussion on Hunter. We're going to do an arena coup after this, either immediately after or after a co-op run with Hafu. We'll see, but we'll eventually get to our arena coup Hunter run. So Hunter's an interesting class in this meta right now, because I mean, I don't think anyone thinks it's like the greatest class, but it's also not warrior. Where do we think it fits in the meta, and how do we play it? You want to start us off, Merps?
Sure. I think Hunter has gotten just a little bit weaker, not because I think the power of aggro has gotten weaker. In fact, I think if you can draft an aggressive deck, I think it's more powerful now than before. People have less answers, not just board clears. Their curve is a little bit messier, and it's a lot tougher for them to just deal with like face Hunter in the arena. But I think it's much tougher to draft that double Glaive Zuka, triple Web Spinner, just all out aggressive deck. And I think that's where Hunter really shines. That most of the time, look, if you can get Brave Archer to work with your deck, that's great. But that's what I'm talking about, right? If you draft Brave Archer, and if you want to get it to work, you need that double Glaive Zuka, triple Web Spinner deck that I was talking about, which was much easier to get in VRM. And now sometimes you're forced to draft this Capture Jormonger, which you're not unhappy with, but it doesn't fit into your game plan, and it doesn't fit into those like steamroll Hunter decks, which just propel you to 12-0 to 12-1, and you just finish the entire run in an hour, and everyone is like demolished by turn 5. And Control Hunter was never that good. You could get it to work, but that's not where the strength of the class lies.
Disagree.
No. No.
I like Control.
I know. I know you guys are going to disagree with this, but I really think Hunter is the strongest when you can really tempo out, when you can just burn out your opponents by turn 7. And like you can definitely still win with Control Hunter, but I think because TGT kind of forces you to play Control Hunter, and other classes are just better at Control. Hunter has gotten weaker.
Yeah, I mean, so I am a huge proponent for Control Hunter. When we were building Hearth Arena, I remember one of the first discussions we had with the programmer owner of Hearth Arena when we're doing the algorithm is, wait, why do you guys want us to build Control Hunters? And I was like, no, 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 Control Hunters are great. They work. You unleash. You like Hunter's Mark. You do stuff. You flip the board. Your opponent can't do anything. You win the game. It's wonderful. You can get card advantage. It's unexpected. And I've been pushing that for a while, but I do think Control Hunter has gotten much weaker in TGT. I've tried it a few times. It hasn't quite worked out because your hero power still doesn't add card advantage, which is a problem when everyone's hero power adds card advantage. So you still have to shift to aggro like kind of quicker than your Control Hunter would want to. And when you're missing that card advantage, it really hurts when the meta kind of slows down. So I do think that Hunter, like Rogue, I think have both shifted towards a little bit more towards the aggro side. Just classes that can't get card advantage from their hero power. And Rogue obviously can in the beginning, but then there's a limit on that, right? Whereas Priest and Warlock may not have something that comes on the board, but Priest will heal something on the board, so Priests have it half the time, and Warlocks, obviously, you get a card. And I don't know what Warriors are doing, but let's just not bother with that.
Yeah. I think I haven't played enough. Everyone keeps asking me how I rate all the classes and what I think about certain cards. And I mean, I don't think anyone has perfect information yet, right? So everyone's still adjusting them. And I mean, I've played 200 runs. They've gone like 12 and 10s, but so I'm pretty biased, right? Like that's not a good
Were
sample
they Control Hunters or were they mid-range?
One had
faster?
double unleash and a knife juggler. I went 12 and 1. It's pretty dumb. It was like pretty bad other than that combo, and I had it every time. I had knife juggler. I had one knife juggler and 2 unleashes, and I always got like a ridiculous knife juggler unleash combo. So one like every game. It's really good against Paladin.
Yes, it's incredible against Paladin. And that's one of the things with Control Hunter is we call it Control Hunter, but what we really mean is kind of Combo Hunter, because a Hunter can only play Control if it gets these combos down. And Unleash is such a good combo trigger for so many different things. But again, you see Unleash less now than you used to because of the dilution. So it's not that Control Hunter can't work, it's just a lot harder to build. And the rest of your cards just push it to this weird mid-rangey position, I think, that isn't very good. So, I don't know. I have them as one of my lowest classes, but obviously ahead of the Warrior. But I don't think they're working out very well in this meta.
I'm surprised you guys haven't brought up Kraken at all. It feels like the most OP late game card. You keep like saying Warmonger, which is great. I mean, it's amazing. But Kraken just feels insane. It's like, you know, like it makes an impact on the board.
We've talked about that previously.
I think we've talked so much about Kraken that if our listeners hear us talk more about Kraken, they will just like delete everything off of their computers and be like,
that's our consensus that it's amazing.
I mean, if they don't know that it's good by now, then they just like hearing the sound of our voices buzz in their ear without comprehension.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I think that that wraps it up for this week. Thank you for sticking around for all hour and a half almost of this. Big thanks to Hafu, fresh off that Lord of the Arena win, the official Lord of the Arena, until at least the next one comes along, as she hopefully gets a chance to defend her crown, defend her title. And next week's Card Good Bad, we will talk about Mulch, Sap, and Freezing Trap, which are a series of kind of similar cards that don't get you card advantage but has this removal effect. And we'll tell you why they're good or why they're bad or how to use them effectively. And until then, I think that's it for us. Adwokta, ADWCTA.
This is Merps.
This is Hafu. See you
guys. And thanks for listening to the Lightforge.